They told me for 29 years to use my voice. So I did. At Thanksgiving dinner, in front of everyone, what followed was 3 days of silence, 2 crying phone calls, and one very revealing text from my grandmother that it turns out my family didn't want me to speak. They wanted me to perform agreement more quietly, and I am not sorry. But I am still shaking a little. This is the full story. I've been described as too quiet my entire life. Not shy, my family was always careful to clarify that. Shy had a clinical ring to it, something that might require patience or accommodation. Too quiet was a character note, like being too tall or too blunt. It implied a lack. Something I was doing wrong that I could, with sufficient effort, correct. For as long as I can remember, the Kowalczyk family dinner table operated like a stage, and I was the only one who kept missing my cue. My name is Imogen. I'm 29 years old, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland called Brecksville, the kind of place where everyone coaches Little League and the same families have been sitting in the same church pews for 40 years. My parents are Dorota and Henryk Kowalczyk, Polish immigrants who came to the States in the early 90s with very little money and an enormous amount of determination. They built a good life. A real one. I respect them for that more than I know how to say. I have one sibling, my brother Casimir, who goes by Cass, 3 years older, 6'2", built like someone who played college rugby and never emotionally moved on from it. Cass is loud in the way that fills rooms without asking permission. He tells the same 4 stories at every gathering, and every time he tells them, they get slightly more heroic. He laughs at his own jokes before he finishes them. My parents love this about him. My grandmother, Babcia Zofia, who is 81 and sharp as a letter opener, says Cass knows how to be in a room. She says this as a compliment. She used to say it pointedly, with a sideways look at me, when I was eating my pierogi quietly at the far end of the table. And I was quiet. I won't pretend otherwise. I've always been a person who thinks before speaking, who needs time to process, who finds the noise of a room something to navigate rather than inhabit. In school, they called me reserved. In my family, they called it a problem. Not cruelly, not in a way anyone would write down if they were keeping a list of cruelties, but in the constant, ambient way of a family that has decided what it values: volume, certainty, the performance of confidence. I didn't do any of those things naturally, so I became the family's footnote. The quiet one. The one you have to drag into the conversation. They tried, in their way, to fix me. My mother would say at dinner, "Imogen, say something." My father would direct questions at me with a look that meant, "Please, just participate." Cass would make a joke at my expense, not vicious, just the blunt instrument of an older brother, and the table would laugh and I would smile and go somewhere smaller inside myself. My Babcia Zofia used to hold my face in both her hands and say, in Polish, "You have so many words in there, Zieko. Why do you keep them?" And I wanted to tell her, because every time I've let one out, someone has looked at me like I put it in the wrong place. They didn't want my words. They wanted my agreement. They wanted me to make noise in the right places, to laugh at Cass's stories, to affirm my mother's opinions, to echo the room. Silence was the problem only because it left space. And space, in the Kowalczyk family, was something nobody knew what to do with. I spent my 20s getting a little better at this. Not performing, exactly, but learning when to speak and how to say things in ways that moved through the room without snagging on anything. I got a degree in environmental policy from Reed College, moved to Portland, got a job with a nonprofit that works on urban water systems. I have a life I'm genuinely proud of. I have a partner named Dashiell Omondi, who is a high school history teacher and one of the most patient human beings I have ever encountered. I have close friends. I am not the voiceless person I was at 15. I had been over several years of therapy and a lot of uncomfortable self-examination, learning to say true things out loud without first running them through a filter that asked, will this land wrong? Will this make someone uncomfortable? Is this too much? I thought I was ready. I thought I had earned the right to be honest at a dinner table. I was wrong, not about the honesty, but about what would happen to the table. This past November, I flew back to Brecksville for Thanksgiving. It was the first time I'd been home in 14 months. Dashiell couldn't come, His mother was sick and he went to be with his family in Cincinnati, so I was going in alone, which I knew would be harder. When Dashiell is with me, I have someone to make eye contact with across the table. Someone who sees what I see. Alone, I'm just the quiet one again, returning to the original orbit. The Thanksgiving gathering at my parents' house on Fernwood Drive is always large. My parents, Cass and his wife Basha, their two kids Merrick and little Helena, Babsha Zofia, my mother's sister Aunt Selena, Selena's husband Radoslaw, who talks exclusively about the stock market, and this year, new addition, Cass's college roommate, a man named Derek Pulaski, who was in town visiting family and got folded into our Thanksgiving with the ease that loud, undemanding men always get folded into things. It was fine for the first few hours. My mother's cooking is extraordinary in a way that makes you understand that love can be expressed through food without ever once being spoken. The Big O's was perfect. There was a beet salad that I ate 3 helpings of. My father was in a good mood, showing Merrick something on his phone, laughing his low, quiet laugh. I sat next to Babsha Zofia, and she held my hand for a while and asked about Portland and seemed genuinely curious, which she always has been, even when I was the family's footnote. Then dinner moved into that second phase where the food is done and the wine has been refilling and everyone is looser, and that is when the conversations that have been building all day finally surface. And the conversation that surfaced at my parents' Thanksgiving table was about my job. Cass brought it up. Not maliciously. I want to be fair to him. He was talking about something he'd read, some article about new housing developments in the Pacific Northwest, and he turned to me and said, "Imogen, you work in that stuff, right? Water policy or whatever." And I said yes and explained briefly what the nonprofit does, and Cass nodded with a slightly glazed look he gets when a conversation has moved beyond his investment in it, and then said, "I mean, does that actually pay? Like, is that a real career?" The table didn't react. This is important. Nobody winced. Nobody said, "Cass, come on." My mother refilled her wine. My father adjusted his napkin. Derek Pulaski made a sound that might have been a laugh. And I felt the old familiar mechanism kick in, the one that says, "Let it go. Smile. Say something light. Don't make it a thing." But I didn't. I looked at Cass and I said, in a voice that was very calm because I had been in enough therapy to know that calm is more effective than loud, "It pays fine, Cass. But more to the point, that question is a little dismissive, don't you think? You've asked a version of it every time I've been home for the past 6 years." I want to describe what happened to the room when I said that because it was instructive. It did not erupt. There was no shouting. What happened was more like the air pressure changed. Cass looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not anger, exactly, but something younger than anger, something caught. My mother set her wine glass down very carefully. My father looked at the table. Babsha Zofia, I noticed from the corner of my eye, went very still in the particular way of someone who is paying close attention. Cass said, "I'm just asking a question." I said, "You've been just asking that question since I graduated. It's not really a question anymore. It's a comment." My mother said, "Imogen." Just my name. The way she says it when she wants me to understand that a line is approaching. And here is where, in every previous version of this moment in my life, I would have stopped. I would have said, "Never mind," or "I'm just tired," or made a self-deprecating joke and retreated back into the quiet they preferred. I know how to disappear from a conversation. I've been doing it since I was 6 years old. But I had flown 1,400 miles and I was sitting at a table where someone had just questioned the validity of my entire professional life and the room had reacted by looking at their napkins, and I thought, no, not this time. So I kept going. "I'm not trying to ruin dinner," I said. "I'm trying to have a real conversation, which is something we don't do very often."
"Cass, I'm not angry at you."
But I've been coming home for 6 years and every time there's some version of this. Some comment about Portland or about my job or about the fact that I don't have kids yet or about how I'm too serious. And I've never said anything because I didn't want to make it weird. But I'm saying something now. It makes me feel like what I've built doesn't count unless it fits inside a box that looks like your life. Another silence. Longer this time. Then my Aunt Selena said, "She has a point, Casimir." Which I did not expect. And then Cass did something I also did not expect. He laughed. Not the big table-filling laugh he uses at gatherings. A smaller sound, surprised out of him. He said,
Okay.
"Fair enough." He said it quickly, like a man who has been caught and is deciding the fastest way to move past it, but he said it. "I'll take it." My mother, however, did not say fair enough. The rest of dinner was technically fine. Conversation moved, as it does, into easier channels. Derek Pulaski told a long story about a fishing trip. My father asked Merrick about school. The Big O's was finished. The apple cake came out. I helped clear the table. I hugged my grandmother goodnight. I drove to the hotel I'd booked. I stopped staying in my childhood bedroom 3 visits ago, for reasons that should be evident, and I lay on the bed, and I called Dashiell and told him everything. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of the many reasons I love him. When I finished, he said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Like I swallowed something sharp, and it went down, but I can still feel it." He said, "That's probably just what honesty feels like when you haven't used it in a while." I think he's right. The 3 days after Thanksgiving were educational in ways I hadn't anticipated. My mother called the next morning. I had braced for anger, but what I got was something more slippery. She was hurt. Not by what Cass had said. By what I had said. By the fact that I had said anything at all. She told me, in a voice that was very controlled and very sad, that I had made Cass feel bad in front of everyone. That I had brought politics into a family dinner, which I am still not sure I understand, since I had said nothing about politics. That she was embarrassed. And then, and this is the part that stayed with me, she said, "You know, Imogen, we always tried to get you to participate more. This isn't what we meant." I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "What did you mean, then?" She didn't have an answer ready. There was a long pause, and then she said she had to start the leftover turkey, and she'd call me later. She did not call me later. This isn't what we meant. I turned those 5 words over for 2 days like a stone in a tumbler. What they meant, I think, is this. They wanted me louder in the way that costs nothing. More laughter. More storytelling. More presence without substance. They wanted me to take up more space, just not the specific space that belongs to honesty. My father texted me on the 2nd day. He is not a man who texts. He finds phones vaguely suspicious in a generation-specific way. His text said, "We love you, Imogen. But you hurt your mother." Something to think about. He is a man of precise economies. That text cost him a lot, and said almost nothing. I texted back, "I love you both. I'm not sorry for what I said, but I'm sorry it hurt. That was never the point." He sent a thumbs up. A thumbs up from Henryk Kowalczyk is approximately the emotional equivalent of a sonnet from anyone else. I held on to it. Then on the 3rd day, the text from Babcia Zofia arrived. My grandmother does not text, officially. She says phones are for talking. But someone, I suspect my cousin Lena, who manages Babcia's technology life with the patience of a saint, helped her send this. "Imogen, you finally used your words. I have been waiting 29 years. Some people at that table were not ready. That is their work to do. Not yours. Come visit me before you fly back. I made Macaweek. Love, Babcia." I cried for 20 minutes. Then I got in a rental car and drove to her apartment on Quarry Lane and ate 2 slices of Macaweek and let her hold my face in both hands again, and she said nothing more about it because she didn't need to. I want to be careful here because I've been thinking about this a lot since I got home to Portland, and I don't want to tell a story that's neater than the real one. My family is not a family of villains. My mother is a woman who survived a lot of difficulty and built stability through control of the environment, of the narrative, of the temperature of a room. Her instinct when I spoke at that table wasn't malice. It was self-protection, the kind that has been calcified over decades into reflex. My father is a man who communicates in small gestures and cannot always tell the difference between keeping the peace and abandoning someone to theirs. Cass has been the golden volume of the family for so long that he genuinely doesn't know what it looks like from the outside. His comment about my job wasn't cruelty. It was carelessness, which is almost worse, and also much more fixable. What happened at that table wasn't a confrontation. It was just the first time I didn't immediately perform the silence they expected. And I've spent a lot of years being told, implicitly, constantly, in the way families communicate the things they'll never say directly, that my silence was a problem, that I needed to use my words, that I was too in my head, that I should just talk.
Well,
Now I talk. And it turns out that talking for the Kowalczyks had a pretty specific job description I was never shown. Fill the air, affirm the existing order, make noise that sounds like belonging. Actual talking, the kind that contains a true thing, that takes up real space, that asks the room to adjust, that wasn't in the brief. Nobody told me, but I know now. I've been seeing a therapist in Portland named Dr. Sohn Adeyemi for 2 years, and I told her all of this at my session last week. She asked me if I regretted what I'd said at the table. I told her no. She asked me what I'd do differently, if anything. I thought about it for a long time and said, nothing about the content. Maybe I'd have let myself be less calm. Maybe I'd have let them see how much it cost me. Because there is a version of being honest that is still self-protective, still performing the composed, reasonable person so nobody can call you hysterical, and I think I did that. I was so careful to be undeniable that I made it easy for my mother to focus on the effect on Cass rather than the 30 years of quiet that preceded it. Next time, and there will be a next time because I am going home at Christmas and I have decided not to go back to being small, I think I'll let my voice shake a little. I think I'll let them see that it costs something. Not to be dramatic, but because a truth that looks easy is easier to dismiss. If you're in this story somewhere, if you're the one at the table who got told your silence was a failure and your speech was an inconvenience, I just want to say, the contradiction was never yours to resolve. They wanted a specific kind of voice. Warm, present, affirming, safe. A voice that takes up space without disturbing it. And there is nothing wrong with you for being unable to offer that without also offering the truth underneath it. Use your words. That's what they said.
so I did.
And now we're here. 3 days of careful silence from my mother, a thumbs up from my father, a text from my 81-year-old grandmother saying she had been waiting 29 years. One of those responses tells me everything I need to know about where the love actually lives in my family. It lives in the woman on Quarry Lane with the macaweek and the patient hands and the long memory for what I've always been capable of. I'm going to be okay. I think I've always been going to be okay. I just didn't know I was allowed to say so out loud.